everyone, my name's Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, and I'm going to be starting a themed reading vlog today. The other day I was looking at my TBR cart, and I was looking at the books that I needed to read either for Timmy's TBR or Magical Readathon, and I saw a trend. There was a word that is in multiple titles of my books. So I've decided to do a vlog reading books on my TBR that have the same word in the title. And that word is blood. For some reason, I've ended up with quite a few books on my TBR that have the word blood in the title, and I will be reading 3 of them in this vlog. The first one I'm going to start off with is a retelling that ended up in my Timmy's TBR, and that is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany G. Jackson. I'm so excited to read this book. I've heard nothing but absolutely amazing things about this book. Literally, I've only heard excellent things. Everyone was reading this in October during spooky season. I picked it up, I think in November, but I just haven't had a chance to read it until now. It ended up on Timmy's TBR for a retelling, and now I'm going to be reading it. I know very little about this book other than that everybody loves it, and it is a Carrie retelling. I, however, have not read Carrie, so I'm kind of going into this somewhat blind. I mean, I know what Carrie is about because of like pop culture references, but I haven't read the book or seen the movie. But I asked Neva and a couple of other people if that was okay or if I needed to read Carrie first, and everybody said I did not. You can go into The Weight of Blood and just read this, and you won't be lost or confused. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with reading The Weight of Blood in this, and then I'm going to also be reading From Blood and Ash because I need to read that for Magical Readathon, and also Children of Blood and Bone because I've been really wanting to read that and it fits the theme for this vlog. So I'm going to be reading all 3 of these books over the next few days, weeks, however long this vlog takes to make, and I will let you know how it goes and my thoughts on each of the books as we go along. This is my second Tiffany D. Jackson. I read White Smoke last year during spooky season. Really had a great time with it and enjoyed it. So I have high hopes for this, especially with how much hype this has. This book is well loved here on BookTube. I'm going to go get started. I'm going to start reading this, and I'll check in with you very shortly. Hi everyone. Ignore the wet hair look. I just hopped out of the shower because I'm going on sprints this morning. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to let you know that I finished The Weight of Blood. I cannot express how excellent this book is. This book is excellent. I now know why everyone was talking about this book in the fall because, wow, this book is amazing. Basically, this is a Carrie retelling. It follows our main character, Maddie. Maddie, in the first chapter of the book, has to go outside at gym class in the rain. It causes Maddie's hair to get wet, and basically her hair becomes an afro now that it is wet. And up until this point, Maddie has been passing as white in this extremely racist southern town. All of Maddie's classmates see her hair and realize that she is black. She goes into her next class, they see this, and instantly they start to bully her. They start throwing pencils into her hair to see if they'll stick. There's comments being made, and it is just horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. Obviously, huge triggers for so many horrific things in this book, but I just think this book should be read by everyone. What a powerful piece of literature, and also a really good story. We follow Maddie and the school following the incidents of this racism. Someone films this incident in the school where they are throwing pencils into her hair and making comments, and it is released into the world because we live in a world where everything is released into the world, and in this instance, that is a fantastic thing because it shines a light onto this town and this racist society that is happening in this town of Springville. The media obviously picks this up and comes to Springvale and is wondering what is going on here. Why is there so much racism? They find out that the school's prom is still segregated. There is the black prom and the white prom. And to get the media off their trail, they decide to have their very first, they call it the all-together prom, but basically a non-segregated prom. During all of this, we have kind of a dual timeline situation where we have a set of podcasters and interviewers looking into an incident called the Bloody Prom. We know very early that this prom turns deadly, and we don't really know all the specifics of that. And we're having these moments of podcasters intermittently talk about theories of what was happening, reporting on what was happening in this town at this time, and the incidents that we're reading about in real time. I highly recommend the audiobook. This audiobook was absolutely top tier audiobook. It's a full cast audiobook. It has the podcast and interviews in there with the sound effects, and it was just so immersive that I really felt at times I was listening to a real life podcast. This is my second Tiffany G. Jackson book. It is my favorite of the two that I've read so far. I cannot say enough amazing things about this book. I honestly think everyone should read it. There was such amazing social commentary in this book. Like I said, pick up the audiobook, pick up the physical book. Definitely give this a try. And if you're not shocked, I gave this 5 stars. This had to get 5 stars. There was no other correct answer. It is a hard subject matter. It is hard to read. There are some horrific things going on in this book, so please keep that in mind. But I honestly think it's something that everyone should read. This weekend, I am going to be buddy reading from For Blood and Ash with Margaret. Today, I'm going to be on sprints with Margaret and finally reading From Blood and Ash. A couple of weeks ago, we were on sprints together, and I said, I need to read this. I put it on a TBR for the 4th time. I actually need to read this, and we decided to buddy read it to actually get it done. This follows Poppy. Poppy is a maiden. She's never to be spoken to, touched, interacted with in any way, and she has to live her life in solidarity. Enter a new bodyguard, Hawk, and this is a fantasy romance, so I'm assuming a romance ensues. But Hawk is tasked to take care of Poppy until the day of her ascension, and I'm interested to see what happens from there. That's pretty much all I know about From Blood and Ash. I know people love this book and this series, and I'm excited to finally dive in. I haven't read a lot of fantasy romance. I've read a lot of fantasy in my time, but fantasy romance is not a genre that I read a lot of. I'm excited to start diving into that subgenre of fantasy with this book. Anyway, I'm going to go finish getting ready because sprints start in like an hour and start From Blood and Ash. Okay, I have finished From Blood and Ash. I will say this is a very easy read. Like, I found myself reading it very quickly, even though it's very chunky. It was a very easy read. When I'd sit down, I'd find myself reading chapters and chapters and chapters without even really noticing that a lot of time was passing. So that was a plus for this book. A huge plus, really. I finished this in about 2 days, which, considering the size of it, is very good. I'm very happy to have finished this in 2 days because it's huge. This follows Poppy. Poppy is the maiden. So Poppy lives a very solitary life, very much in a somewhat of a fancy prison, but a prison nonetheless, just because she is the maiden. And she really isn't supposed to be spoken to. She isn't supposed to be touched. She isn't supposed to be looked upon. She wears a mask and a veil, all sorts of things. There are lots of rules around what Poppy can and cannot do. A lot. Poppy, however, does not necessarily stick to the rules that are applied to her, but she's constantly kind of in a battle of, I want to do this, I want to explore, I want to see what will happen, but knowing that she's not supposed to, because very soon is her ascension and she will ascend to the gods, and the gods need to find her worthy. Once she is ascended, she will become part of the Ascended, which we meet in this book. The Ascended are kind of like the governing body of this area. Her brother is an Ascended already. We don't see her brother in this book, but he is talked about in this book. And very quickly we realize that there is some evil afoot in this land called the Cravens and the Atlanteans. The Cravens and the Atlanteans are forms of vampires, so this is a vampire fantasy. I did not realize that going into it. Not sure how I missed that bit of information. I didn't know there were going to be vampires. That's an oldie but a goodie fantasy trope, and I was perfectly fine to see vampires in here. And the whole time through the book, we're trying to figure out exactly who is on the right side of this battle and who is really doing what is right for the people. And that's really what this book is about, and Poppy questioning her existence in this religion and political system. Poppy gets a new guard, Hawk, and this is a fantasy romance. So obviously Hawk and Poppy decide to explore a romance together, and there is a lot going on with Hawk. I really did enjoy the banter between Hawk and Poppy. The banter was top tier. It was top tier banter. The one issue I had with this book is that it was extremely predictable, in my opinion. I found it very predictable. Maybe I'm alone in that, but there wasn't really any moment in here where I was kind of shocked of what happened, even when I think I was supposed to be. So between the fact that I found this an easy and fun read, but also that I found it a little bit predictable, I'm going to go with a 4-star read for this one. I definitely want to continue with the series though, because it left at a really interesting part, and I'm very intrigued to know what happens going forward. So I definitely have plans to pick up Kingdom of Flesh and Fire fairly soon. That being said, we are on to our last book for this vlog, and the last book with blood in the title, and that is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I probably butchered that name. I do have the audiobook, so once I know how to pronounce the author's name properly, I will come back with that information, because I'm sure I butchered it. But this is the next book that I will be reading for this vlog. Zealy remembers a time where magic was a huge part of her world. It was in the soil, it was in the atmosphere, it was a big part of the life and the society of this world. However, a ruthless king has now come to power and killed all the Magi's and stolen all of the magic. So now Zealy and her friends and comrades have one chance to steal back the magic and thwart this king. I'm sure there's so much more going on in this book, but that is what I know from the synopsis. So I'm going to go read this, and I will report back very soon with what I'm feeling about Children of Blood and Bone. I have finished Children of Blood and Bone, and there's a lot that I loved about this book, and there were some choices that weren't my favorite. All in all, I think I'm going to give this 3 stars. I really hummed and hawed over 3 versus 4. But for me, it probably is more like a 3.5, but I don't really do 0.5 stars, so I'm gonna just go with a 3. This book follows Zealy. Zealy remembers when there was magic in this world, but magic was taken by the king. The king ultimately feared magic and feared that the magic would be more powerful than him and decided to eradicate magic. He killed off all of the Magi's of the land and also kind of destroyed the power that was feeding the magic into the land. Now, however, 3 artifacts have come from basically the gods to bring magic back, and it is up to Zealy and her brother Zane and their friend Amari to bring these together and bring magic back and make new Magi's. The part that I loved about this book was watching Zealy and her friends fight against the oppression that they have been under since magic was taken. It really was a good way of looking at what happens when an older generation sees something one way and when a younger generation understands that it needs to be different, and seeing these young people really come together and fight for what they know should be the way of this world. Loved that part. However, there is a few things in this book that I didn't quite love. There was in the middle of this book a lot of characters that became a part of Zealy's companions, but then very quickly were gone. and then a new set of people would come and be gone. And I felt like the revolving door of characters was just a little bit too revolving, and I couldn't really settle into who was who and who was what kind of magic did they have, why they were there, what was their point in the story. I had trouble with that. There is also a romance in this book, which I won't go into details because it could be spoilers, but there is a romance in this book that I just felt was completely unnecessary and somewhat cluttered up the book, as well as cluttered up what I think the author was trying to do. It just seemed to take away from the main points of the story and, like I said, just cluttered it. If this maybe would have been done over a few books or in a longer book, maybe I wouldn't have felt that way. But the amount that was happening in this book, a lot of it started to feel just a little bit too cluttered. So like I said, there were some things that I really liked about this book and some things that were not my favorite, and that's how we came out at a 3-star rating. But that is the last book for this vlog. This is the last book that I'm reading with the word blood in the title. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.